Jim Rowan, how you going? It is January 15th. It's Friday night. It's a warmish night. The sky is dark because it is night. You might be able to hear some sirens in the background because it's, I live in the city. And yeah, obviously, bit different, special time for a podcast, different from usual. I have been gifted some new equipment. I'm testing a new audio device program. So see how this goes, eh? Hopefully it produces better quality than what I've been putting out so far. Because I don't know, if you've been listening, I have made mention of being a little frustrated with what I've been able to achieve or not achieve so far with it. So we'll give it a crack, and we'll give it a crack on something different in terms of content as well. I'm going to go back in time. I mentioned this on the last podcast. I wanted to go back to the beginning of the Wrestle Kingdom era, is what I'm going to call it. So, of course, Wrestle Kingdom, the first Wrestle Kingdom was in 2007, the Tokyo Dome show on January 4th, 2007. But I'm not going to go there yet because I'm still mucking around with this program. And I think just starting with that event would be, I don't know. I think it's only right to give some preamble, a bit of history that led up to that point. And I'm going to go as far back as 1997, because this is the beginnings of the era previous to what I'm calling the Wrestle Kingdom era, which is what everyone calls the Inoki-ism era. So you've got Shinya Hashimoto in 1997. He's the top guy at the time. He's the champion. And, of course, one of the three musketeers. And Hashimoto was kind of... At first, he was the odd one out, I suppose. Muto and Chono were popular pretty quickly and early. But Hashimoto really had to build his reputation up over the years, throughout the 90s. And he did that mostly as a tough guy. Like, he was the shooter, almost. And he had these, they were called different style fights or martial arts rules matches against legitimate martial artists of different disciplines. Some of them were pro wrestlers as well, but they, had some kind of, shoot background in some other form of martial art. And I mean, there were still just wrestling matches in terms of being, predetermined and whatnot. They were just kind of shoot style a little bit, because of course, in the early 90s, shoot style was big. UWFI was huge. And going into 1995, the mid-90s, New Japan made a lot of money off their feud, their interpromotional battle with UWFI, as that promotion wound down. And New Japan they were on top. They were the big dogs. So, and of course, UWFI is the third incarnation, and they're all just they always came from New Japan guys. Anyway, bit of a tangent. Point being, Hashimoto was that tough guy, and they were planning a Tokyo Dome main event in 1997 for Hashimoto to face Ken Shamrock, who was of Pancrase fame in Japan. For pro wrestling, he was pro wrestling Fujiwara Gumi, but that wasn't that big really. He was probably, I'm sure, more well known for Pancrase, and then I don't think UFC was a huge deal in Japan, but obviously he was a heavyweight champion, or no, just the UFC champion, tournament winner. So he was the UFC's biggest star, I think, at that time, really. But so he was lined up to face Hashimoto in the Tokyo Dome, but he signed for WWF not too long out. So I think it was just weeks out from the event. So Antonio Inoki, he owns the company, he's running the company, he's booking the company. So he needs someone else. He brings in the Olympic silver medalist, multiple-time world champion judoka, that's like a judo player, Naoya Ogawa. And he's got no pro wrestling experience, but of course he's an Olympic silver medalist in judo, of course Japanese martial arts. So he's famous nationally for his Olympic exploits, and it turns into a much bigger match. I mean, Shamrock wasn't the star, Ogawa was. He was better suited for that match, arguably, because he's a pro wrestler. But actually, Shamrock really. It's a shame he didn't get more shoot style stuff in his time, because he went to real fighting just when that stuff was pretty popular. Of course, that was some of what he did in Pro Wrestling Fujiwara Gumi. But anyway, so Ogawa faces the IWGP heavyweight champion Shinya Hashimoto in a non-title match, though, and it was martial arts rules, which basically means KOs and submissions only. And Ogawa's in his judo gi. If you don't know what gi is, the white pajamas. And he gets a chokehold. Apparently it's the same, a chokehold that he's utilized in judo before. And Hashimoto wouldn't submit, but he appeared to pass out, and Tiger Hattori, the referee, saw it necessary to call the end to the match. So it was a bit of a controversial decision, because Hashimoto didn't tap out or submit in any way. But Ogawa gets this shocking upset victory in front of 60,000 people in the Tokyo Dome against, over the IWGP heavyweight champion, and a very popular champion at that. So Shinya Hashimoto demands a rematch, and he beats Ogawa in the rematch. They sell out the Osaka Dome, so just over 50,000 people to see that. And this time he's put the title on the line, so it's Hashimoto's 5th defense of the title. And this time it's a real striker versus grappler kind of a match. Again, it's very much just pro wrestling. Same as the first match, this is all just pro wrestling. It's just a bit more shoot style. And he just kind of stays on the outside. He doesn't want to grapple. This is Hashimoto. He doesn't want to grapple, of course. Ogawa's the grappler. Just chops at his legs, stays on the outside, chops at the legs with kicks. And then finally, Ogawa just can't stand anymore. He's collapsing onto his knees, and like an executioner, Hashimoto just hits him in the back of the head, back of the neck with a kick while he's on his knees, and down goes Ogawa. And his corner actually threw him in the towel. But again, a bit of a different kind of a finish. They're finding little ways of protecting these guys. Anyway, fast forward a while, because Hashimoto loses the championship in between. We'll get to that. But in 1999, there's the big rematch that they build towards. It's the rubber match, Gaba versus Hashimoto, and this is the controversial bout. It's one of the most controversial matches in history, wherein there's no titles on the line. It's just bragging rights. It's just the rubber match, and I mean, it's officially listed as a no contest, but there's no doubt over who was on top of the fight. And I mean, the way it goes, it kind of starts normally. It's a bit rough in the way they grapple, and then there's just a moment when Ogawa gets Hashimoto down and just throws a few punches that are real hard, and Hashimoto has to kind of scramble away, and his nose is bleeding, and he gets into the corner, and you can see it on his face. He's like, okay, what's going on? He's not working with me here. And he's put in a tough spot because he is, I mean, he's not, I'm sure a very tough guy, but he's not a freaking Olympian. He's against an Olympian. And that is not cooperating with him and wants a real fight. So, I mean, look, that's not agreed upon. I think that in Japan they keep these things a bit are more tighter-lipped about these things than in the States or elsewhere, where there's kind of shoot videos and whatnot. And I don't know, I guess maybe they could exist in Japan as well. Obviously, I wouldn't understand them, but I feel like we would have translations of those and access to those if they existed as Japanese wrestling fans. So yeah, this stuff doesn't come out as much as it does in the United States. But I guess what we can get from what happened. By the way, yeah. So basically, the match went on like that. Ogawa just kept beating him down. Eventually, Hashimoto just kind of collapses and rolls under the ropes toward his corner, who kind of just stormed the ring. The bell rings. It's called a no contest, and yeah, everyone's just blowing up, and it's a big scene. It's a big controversy. But to think about it, like okay, so let's say Inoki just told Ogawa. He just said, shoot on Hashimoto, cause a scene. That makes sense. That seems to be what happened. I guess the question is, how much did Hashimoto know about it? So, because he never even so much as really threw a punch. So now that could be his professionalism. Even though his opponent isn't being professional with him, that could be him just being overwhelmed and kind of, a bit scared in the situation. And to think that he would have agreed to this, like how much damage did he expect to take? And if this is what he expected, like if this display was everyone's intention, that's very selfless on the behalf of Hashimoto, because he's taken some heavy shots and he's made to look like a fool. And he's not champion at the time, but still, he's like one of the most popular wrestlers. So, and he's still in his prime, really. I mean, he was certainly had plenty of money in the bank, but they just crushed him here, and it didn't seem to make sense. And I guess on that front, it's very symbolic of what Inoki-ism became. It kind of existed through Hashimoto through the 90s, going from, it built him up into a star, and then it just got to the point where it went too far, went over the edge, and just killed him. Sorry, actually I shouldn't use those words, because he ended up dying not that long after this. I mean, in terms of drawing ability, and certainly in terms of his New Japan career, it was over. So, yeah, okay. Well, speaking of that, let's dive in. I actually don't want this to be a super long podcast. I want to keep it kind of shorter. Let's just roll through things. So I mentioned Hashimoto didn't have the title anymore. He lost it to Kensuke Sasaki. It actually wasn't that long after he beat, I think it was actually his next defense after beating Ogawa, was he lost it to Sasaki, and then and that was the last time Hashimoto held the Iwgp Heavyweight Championship. As the 90s run down, there's very much like a feeling of the era changing. So Fujinami beats Sasaki, and that's his 6th and also final reign as champion. He was 44 years old when he won in April of 98. Then Chono won in August, but had to vacate due to his bad neck. Scott Norton was the surprise winner of the tournament that followed that to crown a new champion, of course, because Chono had just forfeited the title. So Norton wins a tournament for the championship in September of 98, and is pretty active despite having a pretty short run, because he defends it on WCW Nitro a couple of times. And then Keiji Muto takes it in January of 99, and then he holds it until December when Tenryu made history. He was the first Japanese native to hold both not at the same time, but to have won the Triple Crown of All Japan and the Iwgp heavyweight title of New Japan. So he did that at 49 years old, by the way. So that's how we go into the turn of the millennium. There's a couple of important people to mention, though, from the 90s. So we have Togi Makabe. He passed his dojo admission test in 1996, and he debuted in 1997. He's to become a player within the next decade, or the time in which I'm going to be talking about in more detail. Tanahashi, of course, so he had his tryout in 1998 and joined the dojo actually in 1999, and then made his debut in October of 1999 in a match against Makabe. And then he was a quick rising star. He entered the 2002 G1 Climax. So you imagine that now, think of the young lions as they debut on the roster who we're looking at now, and that quick of a turnaround into the G1 Climax. And he did well. I believe he beat Kensuke Sasaki, the former world champion, in that G1 Climax as well. So yeah, pushed as a star. But then this is notable that in 2002, he got stabbed in the back by his girlfriend at the time, who was a TV Asahi news reporter. And I think more so because of her, but I guess, both of them are notable figures. So, because pro wrestling's still big at the time in 2002. So it's widely reported across Japan, I'm assuming not by this woman. It kind of created a buzz around Tanahashi's return. So that was in 2003. And then I don't want to get too ahead of myself. The other one I wanted to mention was Shibata. So he made his debut in late 1999 for New Japan. I don't think I'm not sure he went through the dojo. I don't know. But anyway, so we made it to 2000. So as I said, Tenryu was the champion going into 2000. And the January 4th Tokyo Dome show, they had over 50,000 people there. And Kensuke Sasaki begins his second reign as champion, ending Tenryu's few weeks as champion. The title then went on to be vacated by Sasaki when he lost a non-title match to Toshiaki Kawada, who of course was he was famously the All Japan, one of the top stars, or four corners of heaven, or pillars, or whatever it is, King's Road star for All Japan. He came over to New Japan because this is after the exodus, of Misawa and most of the All Japan roster to create Pro Wrestling Noah. So Kawada was one of the few guys left behind, and it kind of meant that All Japan wasn't the rival that they once were. They were they were gutted by that exodus. So New Japan thought, all right, we don't consider them a threat anymore. Let's bring in the couple stars they do have left, and of course Kawada was number one there. Actually, it's important to note, I suppose, that Sasaki wasn't stripped. It was a non-title match, but it was in the Tokyo Dome, so it was in front of a lot of people. Again, this is in October. This is back then. New Japan's running multiple Tokyo Dome shows a year. So he's just got like a big exhibition match, I guess, with Kawada, and he loses the match, and he just says, all right, well, I lost the match, I'm not champion. And he kind of just forfeited it himself. Also important to note is that the first Inoki Bombaye was created. December 31st of 2000. It was to become a tradition in martial arts, the New Year's Eve card, and it started here. So, they got over 40,000 people into the Tokyo Dome, and it was kind of shoot pro wrestling with some MMA stars. Of course, for the MMA fans, Pride began in 1997, so Pride and mixed martial arts in Japan at this time is humongous, and kickboxing as well. So, but this was the MMA guys, and it was to begin a tradition. But moving back to New Japan in 2001, again, over 50,000 people inside the Tokyo Dome, Kensuke Sasaki beats Kawada to become a 3-time champion, even though he never really lost the title. Okay. I've got actually an important little... We've just mentioned Pride. This is a nice little side note here. So it might be important to mention, just prior to this, in March, Scott Norton took the title back from Sasaki. And then on March 25th, just a couple weeks after that, at Pride 13 Collision Course, this was inside the Saitama Super Arena. And like I said, Pride is hot at this time, white hot. And by the way, Antonio Inoki has a hand in the booking of Pride and New Japan. So obviously he's still the owner and president and head booker, everything of New Japan. He might not be he's not like the main matchmaker, I don't think. I think he's kind of just like, chimes in for the big matches. This is what I want to see, and that's what happens. But he's also such a big figure that he's also involved in making fights in Pride. And I mean, you can tell from the way Pride was booked. I mean, it was craziness. But he comes out on this Pride show, Inoki, and he's kind of sticking to this kayfabe that he's on the outs with New Japan, because I don't want to get into it now, but he was trying to do this. He was trying to start a shoot promotion, and it just went nowhere. But as part of the storyline of him doing this shoot promotion, he left New Japan in kayfabe, right? So anyway, he brings out the original IWGP heavyweight title belt. The one currently being used is that crown-shaped title. That's the second generation belt. The first generation belt was around since the beginning of the IWGP Championship. So, when it stopped becoming a tournament and became a belt. So, he brings that one out, and he gives it to Kazuyuki Fujita, who's a pro wrestler and an MMA guy. Inoki says that Fujita's going to defend this against Scott Norton in New Japan. So it's going to be IWGP title versus IWGP title. And then he's also got the WWF World Martial Arts title belt, which is the other belt that Inoki held. It kind of was like the top belt for New Japan from the 70s through to 1990, which is, I think 1990 was when they made the Iwgp title belt, or around then. It was right around then. So anyway, Inoki says that the WWF World Martial Arts title belt will go to the winner of the main event and Pride. So that was Mark Coleman versus Goes. So, and Coleman wins. That fight's also, because it's the Pride, Coleman is the Pride World Heavyweight Champion. Oh God, is this getting confusing yet? So Coleman wins the fight. Let's just stick with that. So Coleman wins that fight, and he keeps, of course, the Pride World Heavyweight Championship, and he's awarded, after that match, he carries it out, the WWF World Martial Arts title belt. Inoki gives it to him himself after the match. So, of course, pretty obvious what's going on. This is to set up double IWGP title champion versus martial arts champion and Pride champion. So it's kind of the old and new, or you could look at it as just the belts Inoki held being held by the current top pro wrestler and the current top mixed martial artist. So what does that say? I think it's Inoki trying to say that, oh, well, that must mean that he was the top pro wrestler and he was the top martial artist in his day. Pretty transparent. But in any case, I mean, I'm not mad at it. It sounds cool. The thing is, it never actually happened. I won't go into detail, but they both end up losing, and it just doesn't go to plan. We'll fast forward to December that year, 2001. There was another Inoki Bombaye. This time they went, the New Japan wrestlers went up against the K1 kickboxers. But unfortunately this time, it wasn't shoot-style pro wrestling. These were real fights. So this is when people might have heard of Nagata facing Mirko Krokop. Yeah, that's when that happened. He got knocked out in 20 seconds. Poor old Nagata. And yeah, so it is what it is. Moving on, 2002. So the Fujita was still champion at this time, the IWGP champion. He had to vacate the title just before the Tokyo Dome show, January 4th, 2002. So it just wasn't defended at all in that on the card. Instead, it was Jun Akiyama defending the GHC title, the Noah title, against Yuji Nagata, and he retained it. And then Nagata ended up going on to win the championship. There was Inoki Bombaye again. This is when Shinsuke Nakamura was coming about. So he joined New Japan in 2002, and like Tanahashi, he was kind of straight away, they were backing him. But of course, he's come along when they're doing this mixed martial arts stuff. So he's being groomed as the, I guess, the next Fujita in a way, a guy that can do the pro wrestling and the mixed martial arts and be on top of both. So there's a loss. Unfortunately, he loses to Daniel Gracie via submission on that show, and Krokop beat Fujita. So that was another kind of a nail in the coffin of that big fight between him and Coleman. And then who else joined? There was a couple other people that joined New Japan in 2002 that are notable. Taguchi joined the dojo that year, and Yano made his debut that year. But he wasn't really a staple in New Japan at that time. He went back and forth a little bit before joining New Japan full time. 2003, the problems are starting to show now. We've had a few years of this the title being chopped and changed, pro wrestlers being beat up by real fighters. It's not going so well for New Japan. Meanwhile, by the way, Pride is doing great business, but New Japan not so much. So 30,000 people were reported as attending the January 4th show in 2003. Nagata retained against Josh Barnett in a shoot-style match with knockdowns included. So, like, if there's a big knockdown, someone hits the mat, the referee counts to 10. That would be a knockout if you reach 10, like in boxing. This was a pretty good match, though. If you like shoot-style, this is on New Japan World. Go check it out. It's if you like that stuff, it's good. And then Takayama charges in at the end of it after Nagata wins, and Nagata would end up losing in that challenge. Takayama beat him in May. He's another guy that's a crossover. Takayama, of course, he's a pro wrestler, but he just unbelievably durable and would go. I mean, of course, the famous one is that match with Don Fry, where they just got each other by the scruff of the neck and just hitting each other in the head over and over, and just craziness. And then what else have we got here? Oh, we had Tenzan he won the Iwgp title for the first time. He beat Takayama, but then Shinsuke Nakamura beat Tenzan just the next month, a month later, in December. And he became not just champion for the first time, but the youngest ever champion. And I believe that record still stands. And then, of course, we finished the year off with Inoki Bombaye again. This time, Yuji Nagata faced Fedor Emelianenko and is beaten just after a minute, because again, this is mixed martial arts fights with pro wrestlers. Although Fujita managed to beat some guy I've never heard of. But Fujita's a decent. I mean, he trained in that stuff. He's a tough guy. Anyway, God Nagata had a tough MMA career. He had 2 fights, and he faced 2 of the most dangerous, most qualified, scariest heavyweights of all time while they were in their prime. Like, that is tough. Krokop and Fedor. Anyway, that was the last Bombaye event until Inoki started IGF in 2007. But like I said, that became a tradition. K1, Pride, they both... they actually put on cards before this that were going up against Inoki's shows. So they weren't that friendly. Actually, Nakamura was on this event in 2003, December 31st. Nakamura was on the K1 card. Would you believe it? Actually, and that plays into the next match, which is another match that's worth going back and watching. So I just want to quickly mention Hiroki Goto debuted in 2003. So in he comes. And so did Yujiro Takahashi in the dojo, 2003, right at the end. Okay, so yeah. About 40,000 people reported as entering the Tokyo Dome for the January 4th show, New Japan. And they were building up this NWF Heavyweight Championship. I'm not going to go into what it was. It doesn't matter. Takayama held that, and Nakamura held the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, of course. He only won it a month prior to this. And this is a unification match that I don't know why anyone would care about the NWF title. It was only, I think it came about like a year before this, it was revived. And then, I don't know. It's, again, Inoki-ism stuff. But, Nakamura came into this with like a puffy face, 2 black eyes, and he lost with this. It's actually an important spot. The guy was called Ignashov, Alexei Ignashov. He was a kickboxer, and Nakamura was doing pretty well. He was mostly grappling. He was mostly trying to take the kickboxer down and do his damage there. He was kind of a submission wrestler. You know, this the shoot style, well, like the shoot catch wrestling that they teach the New Japan kids. So, yeah, he's doing pretty well. But then he shoots in the 3rd round, I believe. He shoots in, and as he's going down, Ignashov raises his knee and cracks Nakamura in the face with a knee, and he just goes bonk straight to the mat. Obviously, so the referee just, I don't know, he just saw that and heard that and was just like, all right, that's it, the match is over. Fair play to Nakamura though, he wasn't knocked out. He actually bounced back up and argued the decision, so he's crazy tough. But if you go back and see that, it's, yeah, you can't really blame the referee when you see it connect. Anyway, so that happened a week ago, and now he's defending the IWGP Championship. So that's kind of madness. This turns into a real good match, and they do that spot. Takayama does that spot where Nakamura goes in, and Takayama does the knee, and it's not that much softer than the one he copped for real against Ignashov, because Takayama's laying everything in. It's another shoot style kind of match, and on top of that, it's Takayama being the giant in a shoot style match. There were, Nakamura's doing all the selling, so gosh, he must have been sore, but he ends up winning. It's a good match. Again, I recommend going back and watching it if you like this kind of stuff. But even if you're not necessarily a shoot style fan, it's a good pro wrestling match in that they do the classic David versus Goliath story really well. And Nakamura comes out looking great. He comes out looking really tough. No one can doubt his toughness coming out of this. But also technical. He wins with a Kimura. And it's real emotional. Like, he reverses a German suplex into a Kimura, and you can tell he grabs that arm and he's just like, this is all I've got. And he just cranks on it, and you can, the facials are great. And the crowd are behind him. The crowd erupts when Takayama gives in. So, yeah, that's a good one. But as a result of all of this, the next month he vacates the title because of all of these injuries from this brutal turn of the year that he's had. Another marker of what Inoki-ism, or the downfall of it, in New Japan at least. So Tenzan wins the tournament to get the title back. And then Sasaki takes the title from him because Tenzan's not allowed to have a long run. He takes the title a month later. And then a couple weeks later, Bob Sapp, who's a big MMA star in Japan, huge star, and kickboxing for K1, actually. I think he was a K1 fighter at the time. Although K1 wasn't just kickboxing, they did MMA as well. But, Bob Sapp wins. And then Nakamura comes back. Oh, it's his big comeback. He's, taking back the title he never lost. Sapp beats him. And then, and by the way, not long after that, Nakamura goes back and he beats Ignashov in an MMA fight. So it's cool that he got that win in a rematch, but that was his last MMA bout, and that's a good thing. So Sapp fights in K1, because of course that's what they're doing. They have these pro wrestling titles, but they're fighting real fights in between. And he lost to Fujita in K1. So I guess lucky it was a wrestler, a pro wrestler with New Japan. But I guess maybe they also do that on purpose, just in case the person they don't want to win wins. And yeah, Fujita smashed him too, by the way. And you might think, oh, well, that's what they wanted. They wanted Fujita to win. But then, okay, why then do you have him beat Sasaki, who's a star in his own right? Why do you beat Nakamura with him then? Like, it's terrible. In fact, if I'm to skip ahead a bit here, we had Sasaki win it back and Tenzan win it back before the end of the year. So 2004, in terms of the championship, in terms of the IWGP Championship, in terms of the top prize of this company, goes Nakamura, vacant, Tenzan, Sasaki, Sap, vacant, Fujita, Sasaki, Tenzan. So that's 5 different champions. 2 of them won it twice. There was 6 title changes and 2 vacancies. And both of those vacancies were the result of shoot fights being contested outside of New Japan. So, I mean, if there's a single calendar year that represents Inoki-ism, I think maybe 2004 takes the cake. Also in 2004, on a brighter note, we had the debut of Tetsuya Naito in the dojo. He was promoted a year later. Kota Ibushi debuted for DDT in 2004, but also for New Japan in 2004 because he was a free agent, was happy to take bookings wherever. Honma made his debut. He's been wrestling for a while before this, but he made his New Japan debut in 2004. He only wrestled a couple times and once in 2005, but in 2006 he became a bit more of a fixture. So from there he became more of a New Japan guy. But 2000, oh, this is going longer than I thought. That's all right. 2005, we have the January 4th show again. Again, it's probably pretty similar, kind of around the 40,000 mark, but really weird card. They had this submissions only tournament going on, which is like, they're like amateur wrestling style exhibition matches, and that's the bulk of the card. It's really strange. And then Tenzan, of course, is the champion at the end of the year, so he goes into Wrestle Kingdom, the Tokyo Dome show, as the IWGP champion, but he doesn't defend the title. He's in a big match. He's against Chono and Choshu, so they're big stars, but still, that's odd. And then the main event was actually Nakamura versus Tanahashi, who Tanahashi was the IWGP Under 30 Openweight champion, which was also a terrible idea. I mean, maybe not necessarily a terrible idea for a championship, but it was just given to Tanahashi for something for him to do, and then Nakamura beat him for it here, and then he didn't do anything with it. I don't even know if he defended it, and then he just vacated it, and then I think Tanahashi got it back later, and then he just vacated it. Like, yeah, it didn't really work out. But it's still okay. I mean, I'm not going to run through it. Don't have time. But a good match between these two guys. Of course, they're both pretty young here, but they're the main event at the Tokyo Dome, so clearly New Japan sees something in them. And yeah, but they're not really stars yet. Well, no, I can say decisively, these guys aren't stars yet. So Tenzan faces Kojima to defend his title. If he's not going to do it at the Tokyo Dome, he'll do it against the Triple Crown champion. And Kojima wins. He beats Tenzan to win the IWGP championship, and he did it at 59 minutes and 49 seconds. This is a classic match. 11 seconds were left in the match. So everyone would have thought, oh, well, of course, it's champion versus champion. They need a way out. Imagine that. You know it. It's down to the last minute. Oh, of course they're going an hour. You would have known it 20 minutes before that. You'd be like, oh, they're going an hour. They're just going to do the draw. and then Kojima beats him with 11 seconds remaining. And of course, these guys were tag partners before this, back in the late 90s, before Kojima went to All Japan. So there's a personal rivalry there too. Tenzan took it back. He got his title shot in the Tokyo Dome in May. About 35,000 present for that one. Tanahashi and Nakamura took the IWGP tag titles. In fact, actually, they were tag champions at the end of the year, at the end of 2004. They were tag champions together, and they fought each other in the main event of the Tokyo Dome as current tag champions together. Bit weird, but kind of cool. And then a tragedy. On the 11th of July, 2005, Shinya Hashimoto passes away. And then Fujita wins the title again off of Tenzan. So again, the titles kind of jumped back and forth. And then, actually, before I get into that, before I get into that, let me go back 2 steps. When Fujita beat Tenzan, they, because of Hashimoto passing away, they retired the crown-shaped title belt. They dedicated it to his family. So, it was, as a title belt nerd, it's important for me to note. So that's the second iteration of the IWGP Championship, and they sealed it up there. But in October, the current president, Kusuyama of New Japan, was ousted, and Inoki had Antonio Inoki had Simon Inoki, who's not really an Inoki. He's his son-in-law. He's married his daughter, Antonio Inoki's daughter. So I think his real name's Simon Kelly. But Simon Inoki is what his kayfabe name is, I guess, or his business name. And he takes over as president. And one of the first things that happens, and Inoki had his fingerprints all over this, was Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar debuts on the 8th of October 2005, and in his first match faces Fujita and Chono in the Tokyo Dome. It's the first time that the third incarnation of the IWGP title belt is defended, so Fujita wears that out, and Lesnar pins Chono. And it's kind of a it's a bit of a what's that called? Corruptor wish. Because Lesnar brings stability back to the championship, but his run as champion sucks. It sucks. He clearly doesn't care about it. And you know what sucks even more is that imagine a motivated Brock Lesnar in his prime doing Japanese style matches. Especially at this time where it could be like more shoot style. That would have been so good. But he just has WWE matches, meaning, they're 10, 15 minutes. And I don't know. It is what it is. Anyway, the other news at the end of this, Chono and Tenzan beat Tanahashi and Nakamura for the tag titles later that month. And then in November, Yuke's purchases New Japan Pro Wrestling from Antonio Inoki, but they retained Simon Inoki as the president. And another note from 2005 is that Romero, Black Tiger, or Black Tiger 4, was Rocky Romero. He debuted for the New Japan Dojo in 2005. So, Look, I'm actually going to wrap it up there. I'm going to go through, in the next one, I'm going to go through 2006 in more detail. So that'll cover Lesnar's run as champion, and it'll cover the transition. Lesnar plays a big part. In my opinion, Lesnar's the kind of the final the final symbol of Inoki-ism, and once they get rid of him, it's really the turning point for the start of the new era. But I'll go through that in more detail in the next one. I want to keep these shorter because I don't want to burn through all of the material I've got. But and also this is a bit of a test. So hopefully the quality on this is good, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to learn a bit more about New Japan, if you're more of a recent fan of it, then I'm just going to go from here. I'm going to go through 2006 in more detail, and then when 2007 hits, I don't know exactly how I'll do it, but it'll get more detailed from this point. I just wanted a bit of a precursor to the era that was to come, so you kind of have an idea of what's going on and what we're getting away from, and why the change is significant. So thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, have a good one.